are ill with COVID, and I wish you well and that you recover quite quickly from your symptoms of the COVID. And yeah, I just thought we could open it up if anybody has any particular place of the Gita they'd like to read from, or any particular question you may have that never had a chance to ask, or we can go like that. I wanted it to just be a little more interactive than it was the last time. I like the interactive type. Interactive, that's the right word. I think that's the right word. And see, Bhagavad Chaitanya Das.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and Gurudeva.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. If you are okay with the chapter 4, the verses on the karma, akarma, and vikarma.
Okay. You're talking about the intricacies of action are hard to understand. Therefore, they want you to know properly what action is and what forbidden action is and what inaction is. This is what the area which you're speaking about.
It's Maharaj.
Yeah, 18, 19, or 17, 18, a little bit in 19. So we can do that. We can go over that a little bit. Anything in particular that you're curious about from this section of the Gita?
I'm just interested to hear from you, Maharaj, on those verses.
I couldn't quite hear you.
Just wanted to hear from you on those verses.
Oh, hear from me on these verses. Okay. So it starts with, actually it starts a long time ago.
It's like 16, 17, 18, I think.
Yeah. So 16, kim karmati kavyo kyatra mohita tate karma pravakshami yajgatva mokshaye sabat. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. Very interesting that just by knowing this, we'll be liberated from all misfortune. Pretty interesting statement. Trying to see who's all here. Because can you turn take the verse off the screen so I can see who our possible readers are? I don't want to leave any of our professional readers out. We have Sri Rupa Manjari, who is one of our professional readers. Would you like to read the purport, Sri Rupa Manjari?
Yes, ma'am. Action in Krishna consciousness has to be executed in accord with the examples of previous bona fide devotees. This is recommended in the 15th verse. Why such action should not be independent will be explained in the text to follow. To act in Krishna consciousness, one has to follow the leadership of authorized persons who are in line of disciplic succession, as explained in the beginning of this chapter. The system of Krishna consciousness was first narrated to the sun god. The sun god explained it to his son Manu. Manu explained it to his son Ishvaku, and the system is current on the earth from that very remote time. Therefore, one has to follow in the footsteps of previous authorities in the line of disciplic succession. Otherwise, even the most intelligent men will be bewildered regarding the standard actions of Krishna consciousness. For this reason, the Lord decided to instruct Arjuna in Krishna consciousness directly. Because of the direct instruction of the Lord to Arjuna, anyone who follows in the footsteps of Arjuna is certainly not bewildered. It is said that one can ascertain the ways of religion simply by imperfect experimental knowledge. Actually, the principles of religion can only be laid down by the Lord himself. No one can manufacture a religious principle by imperfect speculation. One must follow in the footsteps of great authorities like Brahma, Shiva, Narada, Manu, the Kumaras, Kapila, Prahlad, Bhishma, Sukadev, Goswami, Maharaj, Janaka, and Bali Maharaj. By mental speculation, one cannot ascertain what is religion or self-realization. Therefore, out of causeless mercy to his devotees, the Lord explains directly to Arjuna what action is and what inaction is. Only action performed in Krishna consciousness can deliver a person from the entanglement of material existence.
So any thoughts on this? Any reflections or feedback from this verse and purport? One thing is the purport refers to the 15th verse, and the 15th verse states that all the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature, which goes back to several verses, which Krishna is explaining that. And therefore you should perform your duty following in their footsteps. So some reflections or some opening here from Bhagavad-gita. We are in text 16 of chapter 4 Bhagavad. Those who just showed up. Some thoughts or reflections on this verse. So even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. One thing I noticed, and maybe we can get some help from the esteemed group here, is that the verse states that the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction, right? And then Krishna says, I shall now explain to you what action is. And if you know what action is, then you'll be liberated from all misfortune. So why doesn't Krishna say, I'll tell you what action and inaction is? When he actually tells us in the next verse that the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. And then the next verse, one who sees inaction in action and action and inaction is intelligent among men. So we should open this up a little bit because Krishna is going to explain this process to us. And Prabhupada begins in the first paragraph, why action should not be independent will be explained in the text to follow, Because the next text that follows is the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is and what forbidden action is and what inaction is. So there's three categories. Some thoughts, some reflection. We have an active group here. Sri Rupa Manjari.
It just makes me think, like, I often am amazed by how limited my knowledge is and my understanding of things are. And I know that I want to take it literal, but action and inaction, but I know that that's not it. It's not literally. So how do we see things? I don't know, like how to get past that, like, you know, just taking things literally for the meaning of the word, the way it is written. I feel like that's my go-to all the time. And it's so hard for me to get past it.
So what we'll do is we'll go through the purports in a second, but let's just read the three verses together here, okay? Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. So before he said he was going to tell us about action, explain to you what action is, and knowing that you'll be delivered from misfortune. So now he's telling us that the intricacies, all the details of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should properly know what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. And then he says, one who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. So this, we could bring this purport. Let me see if now, okay, we'll conclude with this here. One is understood to be in full knowledge whose every endeavor, action, is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So this is the knowledge that, in other words, the fire of knowledge is going to burn this up. And the knowledge that Krishna is giving us is to be able to understand the intricacies of these three things. Proper, what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. We have this in that we have this understanding. So somebody give us an example how this works. I'll give an example. I'll tell a story. Stories are always good. Stories are always good. There may be some devotees here who have been out on book distribution, selling Prabhupada's books. And I remember myself being out on book distribution and somebody telling me, why don't I get a job? Why don't you get a job? As if distributing a book is not, I mean, how many people go out and sell books door to door? I mean, when I was a kid, they used to go door to door and sell encyclopedias. In fact, my father bought a set of encyclopedias. I have no reason why. I mean, if you didn't have a set of encyclopedias, it'd be like not having Google today or something. And so we consider that to be proper action. In other words, distributing books. And then one time we were on the farm and we were digging, and somebody came by and said, "Why are you working so hard?" In other words, it's like, first you're accused of not work. Why don't you get a job? And then when we're out there doing hard labor work, another person comes by and says, "Why are you doing?" It's just like we're damned if you do and damned if you don't. In other words, because they can't actually see action properly. They can't see action properly. It's just like when we go out. Okay, I'll tell a story. I was in Amsterdam. No, Amsterdam? No, I was in Antwerp. I was in Antwerp one time, or as they say, Antwerpen. I was in Antwerp one time, and I was walking from the temple about 2 or 3 blocks to a devotee's house to have lunch. And they were building an underground or a what do you call it, train, like a above ground train, above ground, what do you call that, train, subway. And I guess it's not a subway, it's a upway. And so there was a guy, those machines that jackhammers. There was a guy running one of these jackhammers, and just like his whole body was just like just shaking and shaking and shaking. And then he saw me walking down the street in a robe, and he just stopped. He's like curious, what is this guy doing now? What is this guy doing? For him, it was like very, very odd that I could be there, such a thing could exist. And he just goes back. I'm thinking to myself, he thinks he's very much engaged in action. He's very, very, he's active. And he thinks I'm just some guy walking down the street in a robe that's not, not engaged in any type of action. But in reality, because devotees understand the intricacies of action, forbidden action and inaction, we can see it. it's just like sometimes if you're sitting there just chanting japa, someone may say, why don't you, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. And sometimes, and if somebody's running the jackhammer, he thinks he's very active, but they have a misunderstanding of what action and inaction is, and what to speak of forbidden action. What to speak of forbidden action. So to answer your question, without any more stories, it's like the idea is these words are Jenny, how do you recognize purified activity in other people, or is it based on my relationship with, sorry, I gotta open it up completely. Okay, I'll get to that 1 second. Let me just finish up with Sri Rupa Manjari. We take in other words, Krishna's opening up the meanings of these words for us. In other words, and the purports will open it up even further. And so the idea is that we have the ability to perform an action that will give us, what does it say here? It'll liberate us from all misfortune. Every one of us experiences misfortune of some type almost all the time. We all have that. There's a nice verse, Prashadi Sarva Dukhanam Glanir Aslo Pajayate, I think is how it goes. And it's described that that one who, Prashadi Sarva Dukhanam, that if you're engaged like this, you can become freed from the three modes of material nature. One who is engaged, one who is connected to in Krishna consciousness can have a peaceful mind. He can have what is it? You can he's connected. He can have his intelligence is purified. He has a peaceful mind, and with a peaceful mind, one can actually become happy. And so, we want to be free from the modes of material nature. So we can be liberated from all misfortune simply by understanding this. And so we take these words as they mean. In other words, action. The word karma comes from the word kriyate, which I learned from a Sanskrit scholar, Anamars, to act or to do. But what do we act and what do we do? And because we know that every action has a reaction, be it neutral, be it positive, be it degrading or liberating, or spiritually taking us out of the material energy. And so I think we take these words as they are, but understanding them in the sense of Krishna consciousness, the intricacies of action. In other words, how we function in this material world in relationship to Krishna, so that we're not engaged in forbidden actions. We know there's so many different activities which are detrimental to spiritual growth. And we really, really want to avoid that. I was listening to a lecture and Prabhupada was explaining how the regulated principles allow us to chant the holy name without offense. In other words, they're all connected to the same goal. In the Bhagavad-gita, it calls it the regulated principles of freedom, but that doesn't just necessarily mean the 4 regulations that we follow. It means all the regulations of the Vedic scriptures that we're meant to utilize to live our lives in the mode of goodness, so that we don't go off the tracks, we don't go off the rails. So Jenya asked a question here, and I'd like to get to it. Is that okay, Sri Rupa Manjari? Okay. So Jenya asks, how do you recognize a purified activity in other people, or is it based on my relationship with Krishna, and not to be concerned about others' activities? How do you recognize a purified activity in other people? There's different types of purificatory activities, and it depends on the level of one's spiritual understanding. There's a statement, time, place, and circumstance. And I've given this example before. When you're in, if you're a PhD in mathematics and you go over to a primary school and the little children are learning that if you put one apple and then another apple, you get two apples. So one apple plus one apple equals two apples. The PhD in mathematics isn't going to find flaw in that educational process. He's going to see the value of it. And so one who is on the transcendental platform, how do you recognize the purified activity in other people? You can see that this is the level that they're on, and they'll be purified by following that basic principle. Or is it based on my relationship with Krishna? Our vision is based on our relationship with Krishna. And one of the things that I noticed in the purport that Srila Manjari read is that to act in Krishna consciousness, one has to follow the leadership of authorized persons who are in a line of succession, as explained in the beginning of this chapter. Evam para praptam, that this, and I think it goes through, the sun god to the sun god's son and his son, etc. And so we have an advantage of understanding not just to purify ourselves on a material level, but we want to purify ourselves on a spiritual level at the same time. And so based on our relationship with Krishna, we can understand if we're going above just the material purification, in other words, living our lives in the mode of goodness, and then utilizing that mode of goodness for further progression on our spiritual journey, actually our spiritual path. And what would you say? Utilizing that mode of goodness, the material mode. I'll get it out. That material mode of nature to help us establish our spiritual roots, so that we can they're actually being nourished. They're not being subjected to the modes of passion and ignorance. And so, and they become transcendental. We can actually become transcendental to the modes of material nature. And it's not, the third part of Jenya's question here is on my relationship with Krishna, and not be concerned about others' activities. It's not that we shouldn't be concerned about others' activities. And that is a very kind of like, could be a hot topic nowadays with all the what would you say, invasions and stuff like that happening. Do we take a neutral position because we're devotees? Do we take an active position because we're devotees? What position do we take? And that depends upon our ability to, what our ability is to perform an action, which would be what they call here proper action, or spiritual action. Just like I found the PayPal, what do you call it? PayPal thing to send donations for the devotees who are in the Ukraine, who don't have any of are now without basic necessities. And you can find that on your local temple website, wherever you're from or wherever you're at. They're starting to put them up so that we can actually be concerned about the devotees, and not only the devotees, but there are web places to donate to help the refugees that are leaving. They're doing Food for Life in Poland, they're doing Food for Life in Hungary, they're doing all these different things. And so it's not that we should say, okay, that's the karma of those people, we don't have to worry about them. No, we want to worry about them. We want to have concern for them. Number one, we pray to Krishna to protect them. If Krishna, if Krishna listens to the devotees' prayers, and we actually engage in trying our best, whatever means we have, to support them. That was true in many different, what would you say? I don't want to use the word conflicts that were around the world. what we, not just conflicts, but when different, what do they call it, adidaivic, different things from the material energy happen, we participate in supporting the devotees and supporting them around us. I know some devotees, they work for Food for Life, or in UK it's Food for All these different things are there so we can help. So we are concerned about others' activities, in as much as if we were all together in person and somebody started attacking one of us, it shouldn't be that we are not concerned about the activities of others and just say, well, I guess that's Rtadhvaja Swami's karma to get beat up by this guest and thing. No, I would hope that the devotees here would try to hold the aggressor off me and protect me from getting beat up. That's being concerned of others, and also protecting someone from doing something which is detrimental to their material and spiritual growth. Going to be very, very careful. Prabhupada considered the distribution of prasadam in the holy name the best humanitarian activity. Sarvabhauma is, I hope Jenya that helps. Sarvabhauma in chapter 130, Arjun sees Viparatani, just the opposite. Yeah, there's two words that are used there. Yeah. Just the opposite of what he desires, expects. Sometimes we want peace, but there is war. Why does Krishna often give us the opposite? Why does Krishna do this? It's Krishna's fault. It's not my fault. Give us the opposite of what we expect. Like TKG wanted to stay with Radha Damodar party, but he got just the opposite, etc. That's a very loaded question, so I'll answer it in a very loaded way. So Viparitani and Vipachari, there's two words that are used. He'll get what he wants, or he won't get, he's bewildered because he sees no true direction of what to go. He's bewildered. If I fight the war, I'm not going to be happy. If I don't fight the war, I'm not going to be happy. And so Sarvabhauma's question is, sometimes we want peace, but there's war. Why does Krishna give us the opposite of what we expect or want? First deserve, then desire. Prabhupada would say, first we have to deserve. What are we doing that will, what would you say, what is our qualification to have the request or expect something from Krishna other than his mercy in any direction or any way that he would like to deliver that. And why Krishna? In the 5th chapter, we'll find there's a nice verse, Nakartipam Nakarmani Lokasha Shijati Prabhu, that I'll just go to the verse because it makes it easier for me. I usually forget these things. The embodied spirit master of the city of his body does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. In other words, once we enter into the material atmosphere, we're under the influences of the modes of material nature. And our previous actions create the reactions that we're experiencing now. It's not, Krishna set up the material energy just as a government sets up a prison system. It's not, we spend millions and probably more than, millions and millions of dollars. Every state or every county or every city spends so much money to build a jail and have jail keepers or whatever they call them, deputies and all these things. Why? Because we know there's going to be criminals and there's going to be people that are, what would you say, unable to interact with the rest of society. in a proper way without causing disturbance. So they make a place where all those type of people can be held responsible. And so in the same way, Krishna creates this material energy. Now you can't blame the law. If you break the law, it's that you break the law. You have a choice to follow the law or not to follow the law. And in the same way, we choose to not follow the law in the spiritual world. So material energy is created by Krishna for those who don't want to follow the protocol, I guess you could say, of the spiritual world. And there is Krishna's in control. Very, very simple understanding. So when we get here, and we can say, well, we create an environment ourselves. We create our actions and reactions, and to blame Krishna. So why does Krishna often give us the opposite of what we expect or want? Because we don't really know what we expected or wanted in our previous life. What did we really want in our previous life? We wanted something that created a reaction. So in this life, it seems like we're getting the opposite of what we want and would want in any life. We don't know what we did in our last lifetimes. So just like he says here, like TKG wanted to stay with Radha Damodar party, but he got just the opposite, etc. The taste of TKG and the Radha Damodar party is very, very ancient, very, very, I was going to say ancient history. It's like 45 years old, 46 years old, something like that. And so with every what would you say? He says here, like TKG wanted to be with the Radha Damodar party, so he wanted to stay with the Radha Damodar party, but Prabhupada was utilizing that episode to set an example, and TKG was a good person to set examples with Prabhupada. And so look, and you don't see this in the beginning. You may not see the silver lining. You may have not seen it because his words, you may as well just send me to China. And then he goes, oh my God, why did I say that? It's like, like, why did I give Prabhupada the idea of sending me to China? That was like not very intelligent on my part. And so the next thing you know, he's going to China. But now if you take a look at China, which would be, say that happened in like 76, I think it was, if I remember right, 76, 75, 76, 77. So you go back 42, 43, 44, 45 years, and now you see a country that previously had very, 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 very little to do with Krishna consciousness, and now you find a lot of devotees. You find all of Prabhupada's books translated and distributed in a place where they would have never been produced or never been translated or never distributed. Just like, I won't get too deep into the details of what goes on there, but a very, very active program in a inactive way, utilizing the verse today. You won't notice the activity. You won't notice the activity so much, but there's good activity going on there, and that activity is actually benefiting a whole continent. A huge place. China is a huge place, and so who knows what Krishna had in mind to open up China? Krishna might have thought, okay, we'll put one of our best generals in charge. And we know we can have confidence in. But we can't blame Krishna. We can't blame Krishna. We have to blame ourselves. If all these things they happen, don't they have a saying? If you make your bed, you have to lay in it. I really don't understand that. Is there a saying that if you make your own bed, you have to lay in it? Anyway, there is a saying something like that. And so, in other words, whatever we do, we have to accept the reaction.
Yeah, Maharaj, I wasn't complaining. I was saying that when Krishna,
I know you weren't complaining, Sarvabhauma. I know you weren't. I know you by your nature, so don't worry.
what I meant is it seems like it's very beautiful that Krishna sometimes will take a great devotee and create a situation where the devotee has to choose a difficult decision to serve Krishna. And in Arjun's case, it went against his whole family connection, his bodily. But when he actually surrendered to Krishna's desire, then he was close to Krishna. And, you know, and when Tamal Krishna described how when he finally decided to go to China, he said to himself, you know, all I am is Prabhupada's, you know, servant. And
Yeah.
he became probably closer to Prabhupada in that situation. And he had to give up his attachment for, you know, the wonderful service he did with Radha Damodar. So I was just thinking that, you know, sometimes Krishna gives us not what we want, like the COVID situation also has a silver lining, but it's not what devotees wanted or want. But, you know, it just seems like that Krishna is always doing something wonderful, but we don't see it as wonderful due to our lack of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, we can accept that. We can accept that Krishna has a plan. Many places in the purport Prabhupada say that, and I'm just putting it in my own words, it's things aren't happening randomly here. This place is organized. Although it may seem like it's not organized or it's not going the way we want it to go, it's actually going the way it's meant to go. And if we put in sinful activities and sinful actions into the pot, we're going to get sinful reactions out. And if we put Krishna conscious ingredients in the pot, we're going to get Krishna conscious ingredients out. And it's like if you go into school to be an engineer, you're not going to come out a librarian or whatever. I don't know what else to say. In other words, we get what we're meant to get. And it's true, like you're saying, Krishna utilizes the devotee, just like Arjuna. Arjuna asked Krishna, how am I to understand that you spoke this Bhagavad-gita? What was it, like 120 million years ago to the sun god Vivaswan? You're only like 100 and some years old now. And our Krishna tells Arjuna that many births both you and I are past. I can remember them all, but you can't. And so Krishna is utilizing Arjuna to once again speak the Bhagavad-gita. When Arjuna said Kapanya dosha nija, I won't remember that verse. When he says, now I'm confused and due to miserly weakness and forgetting my duty, please instruct me. Nashashaitan, now I'm your disciple. Please instruct me. So when Arjuna said that, Krishna is smiling. Krishna is smiling because one, Prabhupada mentions in the commentary that his friend has surrendered to him, and two, that because he's going to get the opportunity to speak Bhagavad-gita, which is the science, which is a spiritual science, which had been lost over a period of time. And so obviously he's utilizing Arjuna. In many places it's stated that there was a veil of ignorance over Arjuna, so that he would come to the point of questioning. Not to say that there was a veil of ignorance over Tamal Krishna Maharaj, but there was something there, which Prabhupada brought out, where, you know, being such a surrendered soul as he was, I mean, Tamal Krishnaraj was definitely a surrendered person. And when you have a surrendered person, you have, I was just reading the other day, Prabhupada says the spiritual master has the right to chastise and challenge a disciple. That's the right of the spiritual master. And so if Prabhupada saw a necessity and he saw someone that could fulfill that necessity, he has the right to press that person. And he pressed TKG. And, you know, it's almost like it was almost scripted by Krishna. Just one you may as well send me to China. Even he knew he said the wrong thing. You know, it's like it's in these kind of cases we can see, and so many devotees have experiences like this. So many devotees have experiences that you join the Hare Krishna movement, and the last thing you expect is what you get. The last thing you expect. Some other thoughts or reflections from these verses? Bhagavad Chaitanya Das, please.
But yeah, it was like when you were reading that 18th verse, that's where I think that crux is given there, what you mentioned. Like when a person acting in Krishna consciousness is naturally free from the bonds of karma, his activities are all performed for Krishna. Therefore, he does not enjoy or suffer any of these effects of work. Consequently, he is intelligent in human society, even though he's engaged in all sorts of activities for Krishna, basically. So basically, all sorts of activities we engage in Krishna consciousness. So it's actually inaction for us, basically, because you're not doing anything for ourselves. I think I'm just trying to understand. So it's inaction on your part, but it's a full action for Krishna. So akarma means without reaction, because that becomes an akarma, basically. So whereas if I do like in the previous verse, I think that 17th, it says karma, which is like a want to properly understand what action is, like which you follow as per scriptures, you do, but it's only for yourself. Then it has got a reaction, which if you follow the scriptures and do, it's a good reaction. And if you go against the scriptures, it's a bad reaction. But both good and bad reactions are bad for us. Whereas when you're actually diverting all your action to Krishna consciousness, when that becomes, it's actually a karma. There's no reaction, basically. So if you're doing 24 hours that no reaction work, which is a karma for Krishna, then you can play one day.
Sometimes calls it Krishna karma.
Yeah. It's akarma for you, but it's a Krishna karma. So you actually can play with Krishna one day when you become totally zero, I guess.
Yeah. Well, basically, what you're coming to the point of is the 66th verse in the 18th chapter, Sarva Dharma Jamam Ekam Saranam. But in Krishna, in other words, like in every one of our activities, there's reaction. Of course, we're first, and we begin Krishna consciousness in karma yoga. Yet karoshi jadasnasi dahosi dadati yata. Whatever we do, whatever we give away, whatever austerities we perform, do that. We practice doing that as an act of love for Krishna, and by so doing, Krishna will protect us from the sinful reactions that are there. One cannot avoid causing harm to other living entities here. When you're blinking your eyes, you do something, you breathe, you get something. There's so many little subtle things that happen to us in this material energy. And so Krishna says, don't worry about this. I'll protect you. And Krishna it tells Arjuna, you declare, devotee, that my devotee will never perish. My devotee will never be vanquished. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if someone's a Hare Krishna, he's never going to get ill, or we won't leave the body. But spiritually, we're always protected. What kind of like goes in when I read that verse in the 5th chapter. I read the 14th verse, and the 15th verse is Krishna does not assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Krishna's not going to own your actions unless your actions are actually beyond sinful and beyond pious. I don't know why, and I guess I'm not going to get into why Prabhupada always uses an example, but Prabhupada uses stool examples a lot. And so stool is stool. If stool is wet or stool is dry, it's still stool. And so pious activities may be dry stool, and wet sinful activities may be wet. I don't know which one's which, but they're both. Even if you do pious activities, not bhakti, but just pious activities, we'll get a pious result, and we'll have to come back into the material world to reap the results of those good actions. You build a hospital, you have to come back to reap the results of having a healthy, medically cared for life. You build a school, you'll come back in a run where you'll have a good opportunity for education. I'm just throwing those things out as random thoughts. I can't guarantee the actual results, but it's stated like that. And so we want to rid ourselves of both pious and impious activities. We want to become transcendental to all the modes of material nature, utilizing the modes of material our mode of material nature, which we used the other day, saying that we see life through a lens. And the lens is the 3 primary colors mixed together, and we all have our own, like, what would you say, customized color that we see the world through. And so you're 100% correct that if we are doing activities and our activities are solely for the purpose of Krishna, and we're not expecting any of the results for ourselves, which is, I guess if I do what Jenya said, judge that amongst the people that I know, I would say that very difficult to achieve, just like 100% surrender, 100%, what would you say, unattached to the result of the activity. But if you take a look at a universal or a cosmic creation level, there is many people who have achieved that level where they're fully surrendered. I mean, fully connected to Krishna in whatever they do, whatever they give away, whatever charity they do, whatever austerities they perform, they do all those things for the purpose of advancing in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Any other feedback? We have about 5 minutes left. Any other reflections or thoughts from our esteemed group? I won't call on anybody because I don't want anybody to get disturbed. I won't make it into a classroom. Oh yes, Bhagavan Narada, he's always got good feedback. You have a wonderful backyard too. Uh-oh, what happened to
Okay, here it is. Hi, Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the class. I actually read the bottom part of the purport incorrectly. I guess I was speed reading. Where it says
Which one?
his causeless mercy to devotees, the Lord explains directly to Arjuna. My mind actually read out of like the causeless mercy from the devotees. Like, and so
Where are you at, Narada Prabhu, please?
416, I read it incorrectly, but I was just contemplating on this as well, as like how we're all connected through each other, you know, only through the mercy of the devotees can can we enter into this process of purifying, you know? And I was just thinking, like, what are your thoughts as far as like engaging people according to their propensity? Because sometimes we can become blinded by the cultural experience, and it can kind of shut us off to where we start to enjoy certain parts of Krishna consciousness without doing anything practical. So advice, if that does that make sense? I'm not trying, I don't know if this is coming out correctly.
No, that was funny, like doing anything practical. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm always in a kind of needful mood. What's the needful things? So maybe that's why I'm saying it like this, but what's your advice for that, to where we can't become so blinded that we forget?
There's an example that's often given, and I know that now we're more of a congregational movement than we are an ashram movement. But the congregational, I'd like to see something develop. I mean, there is some development in it, depending on the different places that you go, where new congregational members, which generally means families, get some type of Krishna conscious training, as those who may have joined the ashram, brahmachari or brahmacharini ashram, or even when I joined, it was the household ashram that was in another section of the building where the householders lived, but we all had the same training. And so that training is compared to, like, you know, when you join the military, if you join the military, say someone joins the military, when you join, it doesn't matter who you are, you go into boot camp and you just do what you're told. And that lasts for however long it lasts. And then as you graduate, you know, show your ability to do what you're told or do what's the needful, and you graduate and you can go and hopefully get a choice of what your occupation will be in that, what division or military activity that you do. In the same way in Krishna consciousness, it's good to get some practical basic training in, you know, all aspects, eating, you know, just learn it, just learning the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, learning how to interact, learning how to become a servant. There's so many different aspects to that training that's very, very good. And at a certain point, we have to give people the right to utilize that which they've gained under the direction of someone who has their true interest in heart, not the need of the person directing them, which may seem a little contradictory, because Prabhupada certainly used us according to his needs to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. And so we have that opportunity still. That opportunity is there still. And depending on, I would say, depending on the level of trust we have in our spiritual authority, our spiritual teachers, that we can actually offer ourselves for that type of engagement. We can offer ourselves for that type of engagement. And knowing that they have our true best interest at heart. Yeah, I remember there were times in the Hare Krishna movement where people's needs were secondary to the emergency at hand, and there was a non-stop emergency for so many years of my beginning of Krishna consciousness, which I've now been able to, I survived and am able to adjust according to whatever my mental, emotional, physical abilities are. So that's my thoughts, Bhagavad. I mean, I think it's good to give people the opportunity to utilize their talents in Krishna consciousness. They may find themselves more fulfilled for that time being, But ultimately, we can come to the point where whatever Krishna wants, whatever the spiritual master wants, that's what I want to do. What's your thought?
I think that there's a certain amount of magic that takes place when we can get somebody in touch with a guru. Like you can have shiksha, of course, but it seems like just from my experience, that's when it really takes off, you know? So that's something that I meditate on. That was actually the second part of my, I guess, kind of reflection, right? Because even when I went to the Bhagavatam reference and, you know, similar kind of thing, but it was speaking about the guru. So that's when I feel that what I've seen even locally, people, it gives them a very, very strong foundation when they can get in touch with the spiritual master or guide. It
Yes.
just further solidifies the process. And I think that sometimes it's neglected or it's put in the background, I guess you can say. We don't think about it enough, but there's just a certain magic or potency there that I can't capture, but I have to do my best to link others and engage them simultaneously. So we have to meditate on every individual. This is something we've been doing lately with some of the students, just meditating and giving them something small. It doesn't have to be like this whole, like you said, emergency, or it doesn't have to be something that's just a super heavy service, but just a little bit of engagement where they can meditate on Krishna as an offering. And then the second part is now linking them, you know? So
Yeah.
that's my kind of,
So what do you like to do?
we're
Well, I
trying.
would say if you're an artist, paint for Krishna. If you're a dancer, dance for Krishna. If you're a doctor, be a doctor for Krishna. If you're a carpenter, build for Krishna. But whatever talent we have, we can. And it's true. I've seen in the past where I wouldn't say it. I would say that sometimes you're saying they change when they choose to have a spiritual master to take direction from. I've often seen that that's true, and I've often seen that sometimes it works in an opposite way, you know, because they'll feel like an extra sense of, and this one's actually ready. They, at a certain point, they can feel the pressure of that responsibility, and sometimes slip from the standard that they promised. Recently, and I think I mentioned in one of the classes I've given recently, where Prabhupada said that why take initiation if you don't have the determination to follow through on your vows? If you don't have there's a certain that determination called drita vrata, like strong, firm, you know, heavy determination to follow the vows. If you don't have that determination, then don't take the vow, but just strive for doing it. But don't undersell ourselves, because there's a place, and I wish I marked it down in my brain. There's a place in the Bhagavad-gita where Prabhupada says that if one has a spiritual master, the regulator principles become easier to follow. In other words, the process of Krishna consciousness becomes easier to follow if one is being directed by the spiritual master. And I think it actually says easier to follow or not necessary to follow, which was quite. I'd have to go in and actually investigate those words before I publicly broadcast them. But yes, I know the fact that they become easier to follow for one who takes that vow seriously, takes that vow seriously, because it's a commitment. It's a commitment that we want to keep. So I think we're 5 minutes past our allotted time. Don't we end at 8 o'clock? I'm not sure what this program. I thought it was 7 to 8, and I'm kind of like a punctual person.
Can I ask one more question quickly, Maharaj?
Yeah. you have to get permission from those who are the host of the meeting, because I don't deviate from my authority.
Yes, of course, please, Maharaj.
Okay, so Raga, Chaitanya.
Maharaj, I think when you are talking to the other question, Radha Prabhu asked, so somehow that the 7.28 also gets related to the 4.18 looks like. That,
Say it again, say it, because I can't quite understand.
The verse 7.28, Yesham Twanta
Yeah,
Gadam.
okay, I know, yeah.
Yeah. That one also, I mean, it's like who actually gets the determination to do this service? So persons, it's the translation is like persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So 4.18 also says about Krishna consciousness, the work in Krishna consciousness. Action in Krishna consciousness is a karma, so that's how you free from your sinful reactions, and then you're actually freed from the dualities of delusion, and so you get determination to serve Krishna, I guess.
Yeah, there's a nice comment on that verse in the 18th chapter, verse 66, which we just quoted. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. In the second paragraph of that purport, Prabhupada says in the 7th chapter, it was said that only one who has become free from all sinful reactions can take to the worship of Krishna. Thus, one may think that unless he is free from all sinful reactions, he cannot take to the surrendering process. To such doubts, it is here said that even if one is not free from all sinful reactions, simply by the process of surrendering to Krishna, he is automatically freed. There is no need for strenuous efforts to free oneself from sinful reactions. One should unhesitatingly, hard word for me, accept Krishna as the supreme savior of all living entities. With faith and love, he should surrender to him. So that's the conclusion of that verse 28 of the 7th chapter, which Prabhupada opened up in that final instruction, practically, to Arjuna. Very, very wonderful. Because I was asked that question, one time in a lecture by a devotee. He said, well, Maharaj just said, only if we're free from all sin, blah, blah, blah. And I just opened the book and I just said, just read this paragraph right here and you'll have the solutions to all your inquiries. Probably makes it quite clear that if we just simply by the process of surrendering comes from a word that's in English. Prabhupada uses the word prapajante, and in this verse he uses the word saranam, if I remember right. Saranam, yeah, sarana for surrender. Saranam, so surrender in that sense. But in other places he used the word as the word is prapajante. Prapajante actually means to move closer to, or step forward towards Krishna. And that stepping forward to Krishna can be incremental levels of surrendering ourselves. In other words, it's extinguishing the false conception we have of who we are, that false conception that the false ego places upon us, which I can honestly attest to is very, very deep. When you take if you really want to have a exciting day, just go deep into the heart and see what's in there. And I tell you, it's like very, 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 very. What would you say? I don't want to say entertaining, but I'll say very enlightening to see see what stage one's really at. very hard to even ascertain, because the false ego doesn't like, because the mind is protecting the false ego, and we really, really, really don't like, the mind doesn't like it. If the mind doesn't like it, the mind doesn't like it. It's not. We've trained ourselves up that way for such a long, long time. Long, long time. Okay, Rupa Manjari, Prabhu, are we ready? Or do we have announcements or something? Or?
Yes, I put some announcements in the chat, but first I would like to thank you so much, Maharaj, for joining us and for giving us such a wonderful, interactive and enlivening discussion. It's always so wonderful to spend this time with you. Thank you so much.
Nice to be with everyone here too. I really appreciate it.
And we look forward to having you back. You'll be coming back each month. That is correct?
Yeah, I think next month is April. That was, even when I was saying it, it sounded like kind of funny. So actually, April 1st.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
No April Fool's jokes on me, everyone. Don't play. No shenanigans.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for joining us again. It's always so wonderful. Thank you. There's devotees, Sarvabhauma Prabhu and Guru Bhakti. I would just like to also, as Maharaj said in the beginning of the class, wish you a quick recovery. We're so sorry.
He also has COVID.
Oh my goodness.
And anyone else have COVID that we missed? I know Sarvabhauma, Guru Bhakti, Rajabhumi.
Oh, Kapachuru.
Yeah, well, there's a whole list that aren't on the Kalpatru. Was she here earlier? Sometimes she's on. Yeah, there's a whole list. There's like 10, 15 devotees in Houston that came down. Sunday.
Yeah, a lot of the Krishna house devotees.
Yeah, a lot of the Krishna house people again.